So hi everyone, today I would be giving you some information on preparing to attend a sprint planning meeting. So if you go to see, like, every sprint planning meeting doesn't go actually as planned. I can't say all sprint meetings are like that, but sometimes the sprint planning meeting tends to deviate from the actual agenda and it turns into a discussion meeting, and you have the entire scope and objective of the meeting is entirely deviated. So here are some few tips that for product owners, that what they can follow in order to have a successful sprint planning meeting. So there are few things that you need to keep in mind and pre-plan and prepare before you attend a sprint planning meeting. So the very first one is, you as a product owner, you need to constantly update your backlog, your product backlog. So if you see your product backlog, it's not always one time you enter your backlog details and then it stays there forever. Your backlog keeps changing constantly. It's not a one time preparation. So your backlog, you need to keep refining it constantly, and especially when you are going to attend a sprint planning meeting, or even it can be for a release planning also. So whenever you're going to release attend these meetings, especially, you need to make sure that the backlog is well updated. So when I say updated, you can either be updating features, backlog items, you can be adding new features or items to the backlog, you can remove unwanted items from the backlog, and you can also prioritize your backlog. So prioritizing your backlog is very important. You can use multiple prioritization methods to prioritize your backlog and keep it really well prepared. Why I give so much of importance, or why people do give so much of importance for the product backlog, especially during when you attend meetings like this, is because the product backlog acts as a base on which you actually explain your product, on which it acts as a base on which you explain the pipeline of features coming in for the next sprints. It acts as a stage on which you build the entire meeting and you actually run the entire meeting. So that's why they say the backlog is very important. Another way in which you can update your backlog before a sprint planning meeting is by updating estimates. So you can either update the story point estimates, and then you can even update your story points also for backlog features. So if at all you're not able to update this on your own, then what you can do is you can go in for a grooming meeting, or for a pre-planning meeting along with the development team. Now it needn't be always the entire development team. For this type of grooming, it's enough that if you as a product owner, and if you have your technical lead along with you, or it can also be the scrum master who would be involved. So with just these three co-owners, you can groom your backlog, you can refine your backlog either in terms of prioritization, estimates, and story points. With this particular team in hand, you can actually groom your backlog, refine it, and keep it ready. So when you have this backlog in hand, it's more easy for your team, when you go in for a sprint planning meeting, to explain the pipeline of features that are in line that needs to be released. Then you can also explain what are all the different features that exist in this particular forthcoming sprint that you're going to plan for. So that by having and explaining this backlog, you would find that both the teams, the development team, the testing team, and the product team, all the teams would be on the same page. So everyone will be aware of the features and what are the present features, the forthcoming features, so that planning also would be very efficient. So this is why you need to give a lot of importance on refining and grooming your backlog, so that it would be very useful when you go in for sprint planning. The next one is, you should make sure that you're able to track the velocity of your development team. So why give so much of importance for your sprint velocity. So now it's not always that you have to go for a sprint planning meeting and then understand what's the sprint velocity, the velocity in which your team executes, the sprint. You don't always have to go for a meeting in order to know that. You already have the data, you would have already executed a lot of sprints, and you would definitely be aware of your sprint velocity. So when you're aware of the sprint velocity, so for people who are not aware of what is sprint velocity, I've taken a video on that, so you can always refer the link below that I've given to know more about sprint velocity. But just on what is sprint velocity, it's nothing but the amount of work items that your development team completes during a particular sprint. So when you look at the velocity, you would have the expected items, but when you see the actual items being completed, it sometimes may not be up to the expected items. It may differ. So you would have actually estimated some amount of story points, but you would have found that in the sprint velocity that the actual completion of story points or work items would have been little lesser. So this gives you the velocity of your sprint. So the amount of work items completed by your development team during a particular sprint. So when you're aware of this work items and the sprint velocity, you would be able to estimate that for your forthcoming sprint, what all would be how much of estimated work items your development team will be able to complete. So this is also useful information before going for a sprint planning meeting. So it will be useful for you so that you also would be able to prepare the number of work items that need to go in for the sprint, and you can also plan accordingly. So that's why it's always best to keep in mind or either look back at your sprint velocity in order to gain more information when planning your sprint. The next one is you need to check out your team's availability. So this is a very simple issue, but most of the time, sometimes when, especially during holiday time, or maybe during, when you're going in for some, when the team is busy working on multiple products, and projects. So at that time, it's always good to, look forth and then track your team's availability, because during a sprint planning meeting it's very key and very essential that all the members who are going to be involved in development of that particular product for that particular sprint duration, all of them need to be present during that sprint planning meeting. So it's during that sprint planning meeting that all the functionalities, every complexities, blockers or any other issues would be discussed, and the execution planning would also take place. So it's very important that all the sprint members who are going to participate in that sprint are present in that planning meeting, so that it makes life a little more easier for the product owner, for the technical team, as well as for the testing team. So when everyone are on the same page, when everyone are present, it makes life very easy to go in one shot and explain, so that you would understand and you would have an exposure to the views of other people, and you would also gain the exact knowledge and the background discussions that were taking place, so that it will be really helpful for you when executing that sprint and also doing tasks that's related to that sprint backlog items. So that's why always make sure that you don't miss out any member during the sprint. So make sure that you find out the availability of all the people, and then accordingly you would be able to schedule your meeting. And the final point is, check out when everyone is available and then schedule your sprint planning meeting. So here at this time you can coordinate with the Scrum Master and you can schedule your sprint planning meeting. So accordingly, when the Scrum Manager or the Scrum Master, they fix the agenda for the sprint planning meeting, they set up the time and the date. When everything is really jotted down, and when you come to a consensus with the Scrum Master as to when the meeting can be conducted, at that time you can send out the notice to all the people taking part in the sprint, in the next sprint, and you can notify them so that everyone would be present. So these are some points that you can keep in mind when setting up a sprint planning meeting, and some tasks that you also need to do on your end, so that the sprint planning meeting doesn't deviate and go out of context, and you would team would be well focused on that particular sprint objectives, and you also would be able to, you know, complete whatever objectives you had for that sprint meeting, and all the exactly the planned items would be able to be delivered during that sprint planning meeting. So always keep in mind these few points when you're planning your sprint, and also complete these little, you know, tasks that is ahead before going in for your sprint planning meetings, and it would make life a little more easier for product owners or analysts who are taking part in sprint planning meetings, and also for, you know, the entire sprint team. So if you, that's it for this video. So if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.